All right. Good morning, everyone. Kelly, are we good to go? Oh, hey, Diane, how are you? Good to see you.
You have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you very much. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Transportation Committee meeting. Before we proceed, I'll do a quick roll call to remind everyone we need 5 members present to maintain quorum. So roll call. Councillor Luloff.
Present, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Dudas.
I'm here.
Councillor Eli El-Shintiri.
Present.
And Councillor Deans.
I'm here.
Councillor Fleury. Councillor Menard.
Present.
Councillor Drews.
Here.
Oh, you're here? Okay. Councillor Hubley may be a little bit late. He's just informed me. And Vice Chair Leeper.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. So as noted, when the agenda is distributed,
you forgot Councillor Luloff, Mr. Chair.
Oh, no, I got him. I got him. Hey, how can you forget Matt? All right. As noted, when the agenda was distributed, we're participating by electronic means of Zoom. Instructions for the members of the public wishing to submit comments or participate in the delegation of this meeting are included within the agenda. Those who do not need to participate in the meeting can also watch live stream on the city's YouTube channel. For those participating in the meeting, I'd please ask you to keep your microphones on mute until you're called to speak. I'll provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment in due course. Committee members will be called on in order, first followed by members of council who wish to join today's call. At any point, if you wish to speak, you can use the raised hand function on the Zoom call. The committee coordinator will be watching for those. And as usual, we have our 5-minute speaking times that do apply. So as mentioned, within regrets, Alan did mention he will be a little bit late, but he will be joining us. We have no declarations of interest received. Confirmation of the minutes, September 2nd, 2020. Are those received?
Received.
Received.
Thanks, guys.
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Communications and responses. We have the snow removal impacts on sidewalks. Councillor Fleury.
Mr. Chair, yes, I'd love to pull that response.
Great. So as it requires 2/3 of committee members to add this to the agenda to discuss, do we have that approval? Can we carry that and we'll add it to the last item on the agenda?
Carried.
Great. Thank
Carried.
you. Just quickly, we'll go through the agenda to see if we have to hold these items. We have the first one, which is the Precise Parklink contract update. We have no delegations, no correspondence. I think, Riley, you had a quick question on this one?
I'd like to hold that.
Okay, perfect.
On the next item.
Wonderful. So item number 2, Parking Services 2019 Annual Report. This is one you had a quick question, Riley?
I have one question. I do have a question as well.
Okay, so we'll hold that item. Item number 3, we have the cycling safety review of the high volume intersections. We do have a staff presentation, so we'll hold that item, as well as we do have a delegation that is coming to speak. And item number 4, the always stop control warrant review, which I know makes many councillors very happy. Is this item carried, or did you want to hold this item?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you very much.
Carried.
Item number 5, River Road reduction, 60 kilometers an hour. Now, is this, we have no presentations, we have no delegations. Did we want to carry this item?
Carried.
All right, and George, George, if you can go ahead and read the motion that you have.
I have just a quick motion, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me. It was because we submit our comment after the report was went on air. So just whereas the report reduced speed limit on River Road listed as item 5 on today's agenda, and whereas Councillor Darouz provided comments after the report was published, whereas the intersection of River Road and Nichols Island Road is on boundary of both Councillor Darouz and Councillor Meehan's ward, therefore be it resolved that the Transportation Committee approved the inclusion of the following comments from Councillor Darouz in the report entitled River Road Speed Reduction 60 prior to report rising to Council on October 14th.
Great comments. I have no issues. I'm looking, everyone's nodding. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you.
Carried.
Item number 6, the addendum for the Strand Herd Drive widening environmental assessment and design and realignment of McKinney Casey. No speakers, no delegations, no presentations. Is this item carried?
I just have one quick question on it. Chair, and ask just what the cost is.
I'm just looking at the staff here.
I am here, Chair.
Mhm.
So we are looking at starting an EA, and subject to the EA results, proceeding with probably preliminary and detailed design. We are looking at $350,000 estimate for the EA and $500,000 for the preliminary and detailed design. Those are estimates based on the information we have to date, and will be confirmed when we get the proposal from the consultants.
Okay, and then the actual cost of the project, we're not sure yet.
No, we are not sure because we don't even have a functional design in place. So we are at this point, what we are trying to do is start with the EA, see the result of the EA, and then based on that, follow up with the detailed design. And at that point, we are going to start having some ideas of cost.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, I'm okay with that. There's just been a lot of Strand Herd items that have come forward. So it'd be good to get a full costing of the
Shut
Strand
your
Herd
videos on.
project.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh,
Shut your video. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. It's on George's end. All right. So yeah, maybe you can work with staff after, Sean, but if you're good with this item, I'm looking at committee. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank
Carried.
you. All right. So we'll go back to item number 1 on the agenda. And I believe we have, let me just scroll back up here. Item number 1, Precise Park Link contract update. Now we do have a presentation, and just before we get staff ready to roll on that, I do have a couple of quick notes in regards to this, because I want to thank staff. They've been working very hard on this, and as members of council that have been around the table can attest to from the report, there's a lot of work and analysis that's gone into this proposal. Although the relationship with Precise Park Link went very sour for a number of years, since 2016, the willingness of our new staff and parking services to address these differences led to the proposed resolution before us today. I want to thank staff, especially Kevin Wiley and Scott Caldwell, with the support of legal and procurement services for all their efforts over the last few years to get us to where we are today. Thanks to the spirit and the collaboration and their desire to find a solution, working and assessing all options, we are considering a proposed resolution today that avoids a very costly legal battle and good value for the taxpayer. With this settlement agreement, with a 5-year extension of the contract, we're moving forward in a positive way that's fair to both partners and provides a number of benefits to the city. 1, the revenue guarantee remains in place to ensure financial performance threshold for the city. 2, the capital and life cycle costs of the 720 paid display machines continues to be borne mostly by Precise Park Link, with the city only paying 15% of those costs. And 3, Precise is committed to a full refurbishment of all pane display machines, which means they'll be good, spanking new by this time next year. As the independent third-party review of the elements of the contract and the extension, members of council and residents have the confidence that staff conducted the highest level of due diligence in making this recommendation. Again, I want to thank Kevin and Scott and their entire team for this great work. This is good news for the city and our taxpayer, and hopefully my colleagues will support the staff recommendation today. So on that note, I'm going to go directly to the presentation that staff had, and Kelly, maybe you'll want to tee that up, and we'll get this show on the road.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to the members of the Transportation Committee. I know those on the phone know who I am, but for those who may be listening in, my name is Lila Gibbons, and I'm the Director of Roads and Parking Services. I'm joined here today by Scott Caldwell, who's the Area Manager of Transit and Parking Services. Chair, today we're presenting an update on the Precise Park Link contract, in which we are recommending a 5-year extension. Next slide, please. For a bit of background, in 2007, Precise ParkLink approached the city with an unsolicited proposal, which was submitted under the Ottawa option policy. It was to replace the coin parking meters with pay and display machines, install parking facility payment systems, and provide end-to-end services. The primary requirement for the Ottawa option is for the proposal to be innovative and a good value to the city. Precise's proposal was both, in that they guaranteed a 25% increase in revenues over what the city was receiving from the parking meters. The 10-year contract was finalized in 2010 and began in 2011 once all equipment was installed and tested. Early in the contract, it became apparent that the actual revenues were not meeting the revenue guarantee, which then led to a dispute between the city and Precise. Payments by both parties were halted at that time, but Precise still continued to provide the core services throughout the negotiations. In 2016, thanks to Scott and his team, significant progress was made towards improving the relationships and finding a resolution. Staff undertook a thorough analysis of the contract and proposed amendments which formed the basis of the resolution in late 2019. I will now turn it over to Scott to provide further details on the terms of the extension and the rationale for the recommendations. Scott?
Thank you, Lila. So the key components of the contract, sorry, next slide, please, Kelly. Thank you. The key components of the contract are summarized here. The 10-year contract with Precise is scheduled to expire in just over a year from now, but there are provisions that allow for an extension if both parties agree. The city receives all revenue through the contract and pays Precise service fees on a per equipment per month basis. There is the revenue guarantee that has been referred to, and this has resulted in Precise making considerable payments in years 1 to 5 of the contract in order to top up the city to the guarantee. From year 6 onwards, equipment payments start, but only from the increases in revenue. Precise and the city have shared in these payments, with Precise paying a significant portion. And the contract also includes a warranty and renewal program, which ensures the equipment have the appropriate components and are updated as required. Next slide, please. So the chart on the left here clearly illustrates that revenues have not increased to match the revenue guarantee. Over the first 5 years, this meant that Precise has provided almost $10 million to the city to make up for that difference. Since then, Precise and the city have shared payments on the equipment. The city has been responsible for the amount that the revenues have been over the base revenue, and Precise has been responsible for the remainder up to the revenue guarantee line. It is projected that by the end of the contract, the city will receive the equipment at a significant discount, only paying 15 cents on the dollar. During a period of this contract, the city and Precise were locked in a dispute, which was triggered by disagreements in how the revenue guarantee was being calculated. During much of the dispute, both payments by both parties stopped. However, as has been mentioned, Precise continued to provide the required core services through this time. Both parties have been able to reach a resolution to address all the issues. Next slide, please. As outcomes of the resolution and the city's subsequent due diligence, staff are recommending a 5-year extension, as well as adjustments to the revenue guarantee methodology. I will provide additional detail related to the methodology piece and the rationale for the extension as I move forward. Among the other parts of the resolution, Precise will refurbish all pay and display machines prior to the end of next year. Next slide, please. Looking at the extension, procurement has confirmed that it satisfies the requirements of the purchasing bylaw. Part of those requirements are to ensure that the extension is in the best interest of the city, and staff have considered the extension fully to ensure that that is in fact the case. In addition to our internal reviews, staff have engaged with 2 firms to verify this through independent external reviews as well. Ultimately, the determination is that the extension is the best way forward and represents multiple financial and service-related benefits to the city. Next slide, please. Looking at those external reviews, the city hired Sampson and Associates as well as BA Group. So Sampson reviewed the extension to assess the value to the city of proceeding compared to other available options, and at the same time also looked at our contract management practices. In looking at the extension, they considered the terms and looked at industry and market trends, coming to the conclusion that it is indeed in the city's best interest to extend. And as part of this, they confirmed that the city would benefit from the revenue guarantee and the updated equipment and better time the procurement for that next parking system. The work by BA Group to develop a technology roadmap was important to determine if extending the relationship with Precise made sense from a strategic perspective. Considered, again, current trends and what was on the horizon in terms of payment technologies. Ultimately, it was concluded that it was concluded by the city that there are the flexibilities required with Precise and in the existing contract to remain current through the extension term. Next slide, please. Returning to Sampson, they also looked at the management of this agreement, and it was confirmed that the city has positioned itself to maximize the benefit from the contract, and they provided some recommendations to ensure that this occurs going forward. These recommendations had to do with ensuring that the right processes, mechanisms, and resources were in place to support the financial and revenue aspects of the contract. And staff are in the process of pursuing or implementing all the recommendations that were put forward. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the dispute with Precise largely revolved around how the city was calculating the revenue guarantee, which can be a very complex process. Instead of agreeing to reductions to either artificially reduce the base revenue or scale back that 25% bump, the city took a step back and looked at the calculation methodology for ways to address the issues while maintaining the original intent of the agreement that council had signed off on. So there are three outcomes. And the first two had to do with better accounting for construction zones and spaces that are taken out of service for a period. As part of this, Precise would not be accountable for things that are outside of their control, namely guaranteed revenue for parking spaces adjacent areas through a reconstruction and until parking demand returns to pre-construction levels. So when looking at a street like Elgin, which has been recent, when it is reconstructed, there's a drop in demand on the adjacent streets, as in addition, obviously, to the main street, and this will be accounted for. And when there's a delay in the return of demand levels, this will also be accounted for. With respect to pay by phone, in consideration that the pay by phone use has increased beyond what was originally envisioned, the revenue guarantee adjustments will take into account actual pay by phone use, which is nearing 20%. Rather than the 5% assumption that was originally in the Precise contract. Next slide, please. So the impacts of these changes would be retroactive and are captured here. And this is part of the resolution with Precise. Of the $9.7 million that Precise has paid to the city to cover the revenue guarantee commitments in years 1 to 5, we would return a little less than $700,000. In terms of the equipment payments, the adjustments will only impact the amount that is paid towards the capital account from each party. The city's share is projected to increase by about $20,000 per year in years 6 to 10 of the agreement. As you can see by the chart on the right, however, a significant portion of the equipment costs are to be covered by Precise. By the time we get through the extension period, again, it is projected that the city will receive the equipment at that discount, about 15% of the total cost. Next slide, please. So when we step back and consider our options, without the extension, the most logical alternate scenario is one in which we would extend with Precise only temporarily until a fulsome procurement could be run for a new vendor and system. So these next two slides assess the outcomes under each scenario and provide a comparison. So first, the extension would allow the city to defer the procurement of a new system. This would avoid process-related costs as well as additional equipment costs, and would also ensure continuity for residents. The extension also allows the city to leverage newly updated equipment, as well as contract terms which provide for an extra incentive for Precise to maintain a high level of performance in order to avoid additional equipment payments per the revenue guarantee. When the extension period starts, all of our equipment will have been updated within the last 3 years, which will leave the city in an excellent position to get to the end of the extension period in 2026. Next slide, please. The extension does require payment to Precise to address acknowledged issues with the revenue guarantee calculation process. On the other side, however, the resolution resolves the dispute process, so it is expected that without it, reaching any other form of resolution could carry a substantial level of cost and potential risk. Part of that risk relates to the fact that there would otherwise be claims to interest and additional costs by both sides. As it stands, the interest owed by Precise that had been booked has been addressed, and we are only accountable for the costs that have been agreed to. Next slide, please. With the confirmation that the extension satisfies the purchasing bylaw and in light of the rationale that is being presented, staff are recommending proceeding with a resolution which includes that extension and which will well position the city until 2026. As discussed, there are multiple financial and service-related benefits, and we are confident that there is an alignment with where the program should be going from a strategic perspective. In recognition that there is potential for a high degree of change, the contract and extension provides for a number of flexibilities to account for things like technology, as well as increases and decreases in paid parking. And it is also very good news that we'll approach the extension period well removed from the disputes and issues that made this a difficult contract for a period of time. And the next slide. Just like to thank you very much for the time to present this morning.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott. I know a lot of work has gone into this, and anytime you hear the word lawyer, run. That being said, I'm going to turn it over. We have 3 speakers with their hands up. Councillor Deans is first, followed by Councillor Giroux, and then Vice Chair Leeper. Councillor Deans, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Lila and Scott, for the presentation. I appreciate it. I have a number of questions about this. I mean, I have to say, I don't love it. I understand why you're recommending it, but I don't love it because, you know, we've had a precarious relationship with this group, and we're recommending a 5-year extension. I don't know. You talk about the equipment, and at the end, we will have this new equipment, but we'll be looking for a new operator. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If we're going to have a new operator, what's the value of having the equipment at the end?
So Chair, when we get to the end of the extension period, if that's where we wind up going, we will have the ability and the option to either retain the equipment or return it to Precise and effectively walk away from whatever balance is remaining on our capital account. The lifespan.
You have to explain that to me. I don't understand what balance would be remaining on our capital account.
Absolutely. So as part of the contract, the equipment, the payment on the actual pieces of equipment didn't start until year 6. So there was a bit of a delayed payment, and we're paying that those equipment costs annually based on our revenues, and we're sharing those costs. So we're gradually paying down the balance of what is owed to Precise for the equipment. When we get to the end, even the end of an extension term, we are anticipating a balance to be remaining. You know, depending on how many machines we may add in between now and then, that balance could be anywhere from about $1 million up to about $3 or $4 million. So we would have the option to walk away from that balance, and that would be part of our process to procure a new system. Going back, I think to the question, the lifespan of these machines is probably, you know, averages out around 7 years, give or take. So the fact that we are updating and refurbishing all of the equipment right now will ensure that we have the equipment is in good condition and is in good operation until the end of 2026. So by us doing it now, it will carry us through that extra 5 years, and at that point in time, we'll be in a better position to go through a procurement for a new system.
But are we anticipating still owing PreciseLink money at the end of this contract?
That will be our option. We can, if we choose to retain the machines, we would owe them whatever's left for the equipment. But if we chose to procure a new system with new machines with a new vendor, we could walk away from whatever is owing at the end.
And just give them back the equipment.
Exactly.
Okay. I was wondering about this whole concept of road work. I mean, obviously a city is going to have road work. And I'm just wondering, wasn't that built into the contract somehow?
So, Chair, the contract does account for when spaces are taken out of service, but when the contract was signed, and this was 10 years ago when we were kind of venturing into new territory, the impacts of road reconstruction and what it means not only to the road that's being reconstructed, but to the adjacent side streets and what happens after the road is reinstated, that wasn't fully known or understood. So what we are proposing here is just a bit of using the information that we have at our disposal now, and choosing not to hold the vendor accountable for things that are outside of their control in terms of those, the corresponding impacts of a major road reconstruction.
It's a much better contract for them now than the original contract.
Yeah, the contract remains the same. It's really just in how, because we at the outset, the city started calculating the revenue guarantee and set our methodology. So this is just about revising our methodology and how we do that calculation.
Is there any option to have a less than 5-year extension, either month to month or a shorter term than 5 years? I mean, it seems like a fairly long contract for an operator that we've had a precarious relationship with.
So we, absolutely. There are provisions in the contract which allow us to extend for 5 years if agreed to by both parties, or terminate at the end of the 10 years, or extend on a month-by-month basis. The 5-year extension is part of the resolution or the settlement that was reached with Precise, and we have an agreement on the terms. In order to extend on a month-by-month basis or on a shorter-term basis, we would need to arrive at terms which would allow us to proceed and arrive in an agreement with the vendor on that.
And did you pursue that at all?
Through our negotiations, we agreed, and through the resolution, we agreed to the 5-year extension with Precise, pending council approval.
I was reading the Sampson report, and they noted that there was currently no peer review of the revenue verification process. Is that going to be a condition of the 5-year extension?
Absolutely. So the peer review, and that's on a monthly basis as we're verifying the revenues. That is one of those recommendations from Sampson that we are in the process of implementing to further reinforce our financial auditing processes.
Okay, Sampson also mentioned auditing performance as a condition of the contract. Are we doing that as well?
We are absolutely monitoring performance. It is something that we've, moving through the resolution, we're ensuring we have everything we need from a reporting standpoint to hold Precise fully accountable on a go-forward basis and through the extension term.
Is there a dispute resolution process if 2 years into this extension, we're back in a difficult position with Precise Link again?
Absolutely. The contract contains a dispute resolution protocol, and that is what we've followed to this point. And we would absolutely not hesitate to re-engage with that if it was required.
Okay, thank you. Siri just answered that question at the same time, by the way. Joys of technology.
Great.
Okay, so those are all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Deans. Councillor Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. I have a quick question for Scott. While we're doing this construction and changing the machine, what is the method of payment right now on those machines?
The chair, speaking about the pay and display machines, which we have on street, you can pay by coin or by credit card or through our pay by phone option as well.
Are we thinking at all, because we got a lots of requests for prepaid card or some kind of payment without being either through the phone or through credit card, especially for contractors that they have a technician downtown and they're traveling all the core, and it will be easier for them to actually track their employees and help them with prepaid card. Is it any thought or something? Maybe you can just keep it in your mind.
Chair, absolutely. It's something we can keep in mind. We previously had a smart card and we've moved away from it, but we are looking at different payment options, including debit card payments, tap and go, and that is something that we can explore as part of that.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Leeper, and then we have Councillor Menard.
Thanks, Chair. And Scott, thank you very much for the presentation, and Leila as well. I think we're adopting a pragmatic approach. Councillor Deans may not love it, but very rarely do we love things that are pragmatic. And I do want to say thanks for getting us through a tough relationship. I only have one question. That is that at the end of 2021, you're expecting that all the machines will be refurbished. I heard that correctly?
Chair, that's correct.
Are there penalties and incentives built into the contract to make sure that happens?
The vendor is now about 2/3 of the way through, so we have full confidence that they're going to be able to, and we're moving forward at a quick pace. So we're full confidence that will probably be done in advance of the required timeframes.
Okay, so set up for success.
Correct.
If they don't, do we have any recourse?
So because that was part of the resolution, that is something we don't have a performance measure built into the contract with a liquidated damage or what have you. So that is something we would have to follow up on, likely through the dispute resolution process that was referred to earlier.
Okay. Chair, that's all I had. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. On to Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks for the report. There are some good things and some bad things in this report, in my view. Some of the good stuff includes the improved technology, the pay and display method, the pay by phone. All of those things are, I think, improvements. And then some of the method to rectify the contract, I think, is also helpful. But I do have some concerns. Obviously, the disputes, litigation, those are very concerning. The other piece is we used to do this in-house. We had this contract in-house, and these folks came forward, and we went with them under the Ottawa option previously. And so that required no other competitive bid at that time either, 10 years ago. And now we're going into a piece where there's no competition, which is not financially advisable for the next 5 years. So I do have concerns. I'm wondering if staff can address that. What about the competition that comes from going to tender? And is there not incentive for keeping something like this in-house, as many other cities have done, and we used to do just 10 years ago?
Absolutely, Chair. I'll address the market testing point first. The benefits that we have and what was included in the contract with the revenue guarantee, that forms a key benefit to continuing with this contract, and the fact that we have this 25% assurance, revenue increase and assurance. And now we're seeing the benefit of that through significantly discounted equipment costs through the extension period. And that was fully contemplated by ourselves when we were measuring this and determining if it was the best course forward. And then through our external review as well, our Sampson and Associates looked at all the options that were available to us. Do we take it in-house? Do we put it out to tender now, or do we go proceed with the 5-year extension? And based on primarily those financial benefits, but also some service-based benefits, though that conclusion universally has been to of all the options available to us is to proceed with this 5-year extension. With respect to the in-house piece, we did have it as an in-house operation. The industry has changed a little since that point, and the technology has changed. When it was prior to the pay and display machines, we had the single space parking meters, which were coin only, not wired and communicating, and not processing credit card payments. So those add some complexity to the process and to the operation. It's not to say that we would not consider bringing this in-house, and that is something that we would look at as part of our tendering process and that procurement process approaching 2026. So it's certainly not off the table, but it is a different world for us in terms of what's required to manage this operation internally compared to what it was before.
I can appreciate that, and I understand the argument you're making and why staff determination has come to this. But for me personally, it's hard for me to get to a point where we're not going out to tender and let them put their bid forward. If this is truly the best one, a bit more work on our end to put this out to tender will determine that. And I want to see an in-house option here. I want to know what it would cost the city. We have incentives to do this, in terms of where we actually put these machines, what kind of, whether we charge by revenue or that's a determination by revenue versus our goals in the city in terms of reducing congestion. This is based on revenue, but there are other very important goals that come with parking, pay and display machines. Those goals need to be front and center, but this contract's based on revenue. So I appreciate the work that's gone in, certainly. I just think we need to do a bit more work to actually have this, make sure that this is the best financial deal, and that to see the in-house option. I really want to see that in-house option come back, because I think we did pretty well with this for the decades before we had these folks come in under that Ottawa option without competition then, and still no competition. So I don't think this is one I can support today, but I appreciate the answers. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor El-Shantiri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't have a question. I just want to say thanks to Scott and his team for reaching out to council on this committee and present their report. So Scott, heartfelt thank you. I know, maybe not everyone's going to love it, but I think under those circumstances is a great deal for the city, in my opinion. Far better than what we have seen in the past. So I just want to say congratulations, Scott, and your team on a job well done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that, Eli. And I want to echo that as well. A tremendous amount of work has gone into this, and just a couple of points that I kind of picked up on. When Councillor Menard made mention of the technology improved, absolutely. When it first started, it was problematic. I won't name the councillor, but we were out one day. They used the pay and display, and they still had a ticket on their window at the end of the day, and they had to figure that out. They've cleaned all that up. The technology seems to be working far better than it was before. And to Councillor Deans's point, over our tenure, we've seen some real stinker contracts. Usually it's related to garbage. So that's why we want to have the extra due diligence and extra time to look at these things. And I think staff have done a tremendous job, especially with the additional groups putting extra eyes on it, and they've kind of polished this one up a little bit for us. So again, thank you to the staff that have worked on this. So on that one, we'll record the dissent of Councillor Menard. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you. On to item number 2, Parking Services 2019 Annual Report. I believe we had a couple people up in the room. So we got Councillor Brockington. I see Matt using his real hand versus his virtual hand, but we'll go ahead and so I'll record that too. So with Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Just a question to staff about our parking garages. I did read the report and am interested with the 6 parking garages the City of Ottawa owns. And I'm specifically interested in ensuring that the revenues that these garages bring in, not the global parking revenues, but the revenues that each parking garage generates, is sufficient for the costs associated of these parking garages. If you look at the staff report, for example, it says the Somerset Cambridge lot resurfacing included new asphalt curbs, line painting. Probably very much needed, but that's expensive. The Dalhousie parking garage, localized concrete, crack, masonry, and joint repairs were done. Again, I'm not arguing that the work needed to be done, that's expensive. Do our parking garages generate enough revenue to cover the costs associated with keeping them up to par?
Chair, at a high level, when you look at all of our off-street parking facilities, I mean, we do operate at on a surplus basis, so our revenues do far exceed our costs. As with any facility or building, there are upkeep requirements, and we fulfill those and work with our partners in infrastructure services to ensure that everything's in safe and in proper working order. But our revenues for all of our off-street facilities are over $8 million, and our total expenses are about $5.5 million. So we are in a good position.
Sorry, was that all parking or parking garages?
Those are that's our off-street revenue and our off-street expenses. So that's a combination of our garages and our service lots. But the vast majority of the revenues that we pull in come from those parking garages because they tend to be higher capacity.
Okay. Has the City of Ottawa done an overall cost benefit analysis of building, maintaining, having parking garages? Forget the argument about whether or not parking should be provided. But we've obviously, as a corporation, determined we need to have 6 parking garages, but the private sector runs parking. Have we done that type of analysis that says it's in the best interest of taxpayers to build parking garages and have them? You've just said that the revenues far outweigh the cost, which is good. I think that's one of the major metrics we should look at. But have we done that type of analysis? Why 6 garages? Why not 16? Why 6? Why not 2? So how do we make that determination?
Chair, I mean, we have clarity now in our municipal park management strategy, which helps us to frame parking as a service that we're providing, and from some perspectives we provide parking in a little different way than the private sector does, right? We're more so interested and invested in ensuring short-term parking to support businesses, tourism, etc. And we do use our garages and our surface lots to do that, as well as our on-street parking. So we, another thing we engage in is we have our local area parking studies. So we don't kind of look at holistically citywide. We'll look at individual areas to determine what the requirements are, where we're short on parking or where we have an abundance of parking, and make those decisions where we may have a need. The most recent parking facility or garage that was built was in the Glebe, and that was on a pre-existing piece of property. It was on a surface lot. I would say it's not possible, but less than likely that we're going to be purchasing land to build a garage, and we're more so looking for opportunities where there is a need to partner with developers or whatnot to ensure that appropriate supply of public parking on a go-forward basis.
Okay, I'll leave it there. I just want to make sure that the public's investment is paying off. You say, again, the revenues exceed costs, that's good. But I want to make sure that in the long-term interest of the taxpayer, building parking garages when we're trying to get people on LRT and active transportation is overall in the best interest of everyone. But thank you for that information.
Yeah, thank you. Very good questions, Riley. Councillor Fleury, then we have Councillor Menard and Dudas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good questions by my colleague. Scott, I want to come back on a couple of things that sort of attach to that. You give in the annual report, you give a summary of the improvements that have come into play, but I don't see kind of a 5-year, 10-year asset renewal plan. So I wonder if you have that, and if so, if you could compose that in your annual report going forward. Because I think Riley's point's an interesting one, is, you know, for every $100 we collect out of parking, specifically parking lots, how much does it cost us to operate that? And it'd be nice to start having that number handy. So wonder specifically on the capital investments or requirements for each of the parking garages, if you have such a report.
Absolutely. So Chair, the strategy update that we completed last year actually envisioned that there would be a capital program plan built into this annual report. And that is something that we had intended on. But there's a lot of uncertainty right now in terms of you know, our revenues and needing to sort out what 2020 means, and specifically as it relates to the parking reserve fund. So we will be including that capital program plan as part of the 2020 annual report, which should be timed a little more properly likely in Q2 of 2021. So we'll have a much greater level of detail.
And that will give you kind of a 5-year or 10-year window of the condition of the asset?
It'll project out at the very minimum what we are looking to spend within those timeframes on our renewal, on our life cycle renewal costs for garages mostly, and then we can break it down to a little more detail in terms of where those costs are actually required.
Per lot.
Per lot.
Yeah, I think that would be my sort of range of summary in the annual report is, you know, you have a good breakdown of how much we generate from on-street versus lots, but then I don't see a full breakdown. I can't see which asset is overperforming, underperforming, and share that with BIAs or other community members in our zone. And that leads me to maybe the second one, which is partnership. So we're seeing a lot of large buildings being redeveloped. How does your team work with the private sector and specifically the City of Ottawa's development team to leverage existing buildings that are going up and introducing public parking in some of those when appropriate? Because the Glebe example is an interesting one, right? Where a couple of years after we built that garage, a number of properties along Bank have rebuilt. Could we have, or are in plans of being rebuilt? Could we have, and hindsight 2020, could we have created a number of partnerships with the private developers and create public parking through that? So wonder if you could, I hadn't seen anything around strengthening the partnership in your annual report and leveraging private investments. Could you maybe speak to that?
Absolutely, Chair. We, this is new ground for us, and we are well, in a process of following up on a number of things which may result in opportunities. We rely heavily on our local area parking studies. So we've covered almost all of the the key commercial areas in the city to determine where there are parking pressures, where there is a deficit in terms of available parking, available short-term parking. And those, where there is, then that's where we focus we cast our net to see if there are any opportunities. And there are a couple that we're following up on to see if there's any opportunity. We have the benefit of the Parking Reserve Fund to make those investments where they're required. So there's nothing on the immediate horizon, but it is definitely on our radar.
Just to understand, so you have the Parking Reserve Fund, and on page 22 you give the yearly bump, but could you give us a status of what's the account like today?
So at the beginning of the year, we were roughly $20 million, but there will be impacts on the Parking Reserve Fund of the revenue decreases that we've seen in terms of our parking fee revenues, and we don't have a clear picture of that at this point in time, but we obviously that'll become clear as we get to the end of the year and can fully assess that.
I appreciate it. I sort of used the side segue here, but back to the core question. So you have the parking reserve fund, and then you have an opportunity for partnership. How does that work? Do you have to come back to committee for delegation of authority? Do you have to build a business case? Like, what are the processes for your team to bring forward a partnership in terms of leveraging these opportunities?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chair. A lot of work would go into that to build a business case, and then likely through the budget process or through a separate report to receive the authority to allocate any funds that we would require. And what we know is that there's not one. This is kind of new ground in terms of for municipalities and these partnerships. So there's lots of different ways to do it. So as figuring out exactly whether it would be an upfront investment or some sort of lease arrangement, all that would have to factor in, and what makes the most sense would form part of that business case, and then would dictate what approvals are required.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, my final question here. We've gone through a journey with the on-street paid parking zones. A bit of a sensitive time to consider the paid parking in other zones, yet making sure that every business area is competitive in that realm and not holding on to legacies compared to other zones or vice versa. How do you see that? What do you see in 2021 as it relates to considering the paid parking on street in other BIA zones?
So, Chair, coming off of the strategy update last year, we had a lot of plans for 2020 in terms of moving to a more progressive rate setting structure and considering paid parking in other areas with our new rate setting guidelines. But as with many other things, our plans have been somewhat sidetracked this year. Once we have some confidence that parking demand levels in various areas are returning or have returned to near normal levels, we'll be able to get out and do the data collection that we need to do all of that, to consider those variable rates, as well as assess for paid parking in different areas.
Yeah, I mean, that could take years, but okay.
Yeah, COVID's definitely thrown a curveball. We have Councillor Menard, Councillor Dudas, and Councillor Luloff.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair. And Scott, I just want to say, your team does a great job. You do a great job. I always appreciate the briefings. Thank you for all the effort. I know it's been a lot lately. You've got a lot of strategies going on and consultations happening. So I just want to say, appreciate how much work has gone in lately. This report there's a few very good things that I see in here. The technology roadmap for the pay and display, excellent. Great to see that. The car share piece around the use of our off-street parking capacity and the trend we're seeing in North America. Maybe families don't need a car or two cars. They can supplement with a car share, and the way you're approaching that is excellent. The bike parking strategy, I've seen a lot of progress there, and so appreciate that in this report as well. I have two quick questions for you. One is following up on, I had this question last year, and I think there was going to be some follow-up, is around the makeup of the parking stakeholder consultation group. And I see a couple of changes there. I just wanted to ask about two of those. So right now, there's 3 community association reps and 4 BIA reps. And I think the request last year is, can we add another community association rep or the FCA? I see you're adding the FCA in place of one of the CA reps. And I would just encourage add them in addition to those. CA reps are important. And especially, I would love to get you one in my area where there's some big issues. So I'd love to get one there. But I think if we can add an FCA rep in addition to the CA reps that are there, that would be helpful. And then just having only one rep for the cycling, pedestrian, and TDM, that's all just one rep that's there. I think can you actually ask Bike Ottawa to come on to that group? If you have already and they haven't got back, I don't know, but is that a possibility to make sure we actually get that represented there?
So all the composition of the parking stakeholder consultation group is defined by the terms of reference, which were approved as part of the strategy update last fall. So in order to revise that, is something we'd probably have to take back to committee and council. In turn, the community association representatives is something we can, I think those are discussions we've had in the past, and we can take that offline. There is an opportunity there, as we are actually still sitting with a vacant community association seat. And I look forward to following up with you on that. And in terms of the cycling TDM and pedestrian seat, we do have it filled. In order to increase alter the composition of PSG, it's something we'd have to go back through committee and council on. But we have an excellent member in that seat at the present time.
That's great. And no, I think I gave direction previously just associated with that. I remember the motion coming last year, and I think we talked then. And so yeah, I'll follow up offline with you, and we'll see what possibilities exist there. The other piece I just wanted to talk about is our rates, our on-street parking rates. Is there any anticipation of those changing this year, or Transit's is proposed to go up 2.5%? Is there any change that's coming with that, or where are we on parking rates?
Absolutely, Chair. So we applied that increase to the maximum parking rate. So where it was $3 an hour, it is now $3.50 an hour, and that was implemented in January. And that was a follow-on to that strategy update. One of the outcomes to that. Moving forward from that, again, the intent was to proceed with our new rate setting guidelines, which allow us to move rates up and down based on, reflective of demand. But that's one of those plans that have kind of been sidetracked this year, because we do not have a representative demand right now to make any decisions on parking rates. And we're looking forward to things getting back to normal, so that we can move forward with that progressive variable rate structure.
Okay, that argument sounds very similar to the transit situation right now as well. So perhaps a discussion we'll have on transit at another time. Chair, thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Menard, Councillor Dudas, and then move off.
Great, thank you, Chair. Scott, thank you for your presentation. Thank you as well for yourself and your team coming and speaking to committee members prior to give us some information. I do have a question though, and I know that this is a 2019 report, so you may not have these answers, but 2020 is completely different. I mean, the pandemic has changed our parking facilities. Nobody's in them at the beginning, and they're probably not there right now. It's probably going to linger into 2021. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the municipal parking management strategy requires that the municipal parking management program be financially self-sustaining. And that includes the contributions to the parking reserve fund. So are you able to say right now if that's going to be the case for this year and going into next year? And if not, does staff have any plans on how we're going to address that issue?
Chair, so obviously, yeah, our parking revenues have been experienced a significant impact this year as a result of COVID. I mean, we were way down on our revenues through the March, April, May time period, and we're rebounding, and in some areas we're actually very close to the revenues that we were seeing prior to. Part of managing the parking reserve fund, and this was part of the strategy that was tabled last year, we've set a maximum and a minimum for that parking reserve fund, so that we ensure it doesn't get too high, so that we have money that we can't reasonably project to spend, but also so that it doesn't get too low, so that we can account for situations in which we may have a revenue shortfall. And as fate would have it, we're seeing how that applies with our current situation. So we are expecting to be in a, I guess, a deficit situation in 2020, and that our expenses will eclipse our revenues. But that is one of the key purposes of the Parking Reserve Fund, is to walk us through that and to help make us whole through that process. So like I said, fortunately, we're seeing our revenues bounce back up, but the impacts that we've seen in 2020, we will be able to address through leveraging the Parking Reserve Fund.
Could you refresh my memory what the Parking Reserve Fund pays for?
Absolutely. So the expenses, or the acceptable expenses from parking fee revenues, apply to our operational expenses, but also all of our capital expenses. And typically, where the Parking Reserve Fund gets allocated, and normally in normal conditions, would be on those capital expenses. So things like life cycle renewal, things like construction of a new facility, or costs related to a partnership, purchase of new technology, that type of thing. And it's typically used for those larger scale investments that are outside of those day-to-day operational costs.
And please, once again, correct me if I'm wrong, there is also opportunities to partner with OC Transpo and transit-related projects, from what I'm understanding, with the Reserve Fund?
Yes, so we that's one of our operational costs, is to support OC Transpo and the maintenance costs related to parking rides. And then the way the funding model is set up is that if we see a surplus within the Parking Reserve Fund, so if we eclipse the maximum threshold that we've set, we can allocate money then to two different things: either park and ride, investment in capital related costs for park and rides, but also for the road reconstructions that impact paid parking areas. So those are the two things that we've identified where we can allocate Parking Reserve Funds, Parking Reserve Fund resources if we have that surplus in place.
Okay, so recognizing that it's more than just not seeing parking revenues, but it's also the redistribution of these monies into other pockets, whether it's parking or transit related. Do you have a timeline, and through you, Mr. Chair, for when you will be reporting back to this committee about the impacts, probably in Q1 of 2021? Is there an opportunity to have a kind of an update at committee so that we know what we're working with next year?
Chair, absolutely. That will probably best suited as part of our 2020 annual report, which it won't wait until the fall. Obviously, it's normally timed towards the end of Q1 or into Q2 of the following year. So our 2020 annual report will be in the spring of 2021, and we'll have our annual report, which will include that capital program plan, which I referred to earlier, which will track through where we're projecting that Parking Reserve Fund balance to sit over the next 5 years or so.
Wonderful. Well, I'll leave the timing to the discretion of yourself and the chair, but thank you very much for your efforts and for dealing with all these pressures in respect to COVID. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Councillor Luloff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Scott, I'm sure you are already aware of what I'm going to ask you about. I'll build a little bit on my colleague, Councillor Dudas's questions. It seems to me that we have a real opportunity with the LRT stretching past the Greenbelt in both the east and the west, and that we certainly do face parking pressures even during COVID. I mean, anybody who has been downtown during stage 3 of this pandemic, to support either vendors in the Byward Market or to enjoy a meal out, still can find it difficult to find parking. It does seem to me like this is a real opportunity to expand our park and ride ability outside of the city center, to encourage more people to take public transit downtown. And I think that will be especially important once we have the LRT and more people with a quicker and more viable option to make it downtown to work on time. In the East End, most of the people that are transferring into taking public transit are coming from outside of the urban boundary, coming in from Prescott Russell and coming in from Rockland. We'd really like them to take public transit and to not continue to put pressure on the 174. I'm wondering if you might be able to speak a little bit about your future plans to expand parking outside the Greenbelt to be more environmentally friendly, encourage people to take public transit, and ensure that we're not, burning GHGs every day, going back and forth from the burbs and the rural areas to downtown.
So our where we get involved with the parking rides is on the maintenance side, and then that surplus parking reserve fund revenues, we have the ability at least to allocate some of those funds as priorities dictate. But we don't get involved nearly to the same extent in terms of the strategic approach to park and rides and the construction of park and rides. And I am aware that there is a park and ride strategy being developed at this current time, and that those questions in terms of kind of what next may be best suited for transportation services in alignment with that strategy.
No, I appreciate that, and it's important to put it on your radar as somebody who's managing that reserve fund. It'll be I think important, especially as stage 2 is completed, to make sure that we're working together on that. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much for those questions. I'm looking on the board. I don't see any more hands up. So, wow, parking, so exciting. So on item 2, Parking Services 2019 Annual Report, is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Item number 3, we have the cycling safety review of high volume intersections. We do have a staff presentation, and after the staff presentation, we'll be going to our delegations, and then of course, in usual fashion, we'll go back to questions from councillors. As we're teeing this up, I'm just going to have a quick couple of notes. First of all, I want to thank the staff members of the cycling and the cycling community that have been really focused on this. They've put together a list of 74 high volume intersections. I think it's important that cyclists be a part of this conversation. I've had many conversations with our East End Cycling Group, actually. Now that we know that the review provides us with high level options and the costing to enhance the 29 intersections across the city. This is not a rollout plan, which requires a number of years and lots of funding to achieve. Funding, which is scarce, clearly with we're dealing with right now with budget due to COVID-19. And I'll remind members of council that the discussions on funding should take place at budget rather than the context of this morning's committee meeting. But at least we know where the improvements are required. And we need to be able to deliver to increase safety to our vulnerable road users. Now, some of those improvements are going to be rolled out in the future with road renewal projects, and I'm hopeful we can put a large dent in the 29 intersections. I certainly encourage transportation staff to work closely with their staff and infrastructure to identify and capitalize on those specific opportunities. And since 10 intersections on the list are federal lands across the city, Mayor Watson, Vice Chair Leeper, and I will be jointly sending a letter today to the NCC CEO, Toby Nussbaum, I know that guy, asking him to proceed with their own cycling safety review of those intersections that are in the jurisdiction of the NCC and work with us as shared jurisdictions. I'm hopeful that our partners will work together. We'll be able to improve safe cycling conditions across the city of Ottawa. Maybe not immediately, but nonetheless, concentrate on a really impactful way. Thanks again to our staff for their diligent work. I very much look forward to the discussion this morning. So on that, I'll turn it over to staff. They can load up the presentation, and then we'll go to delegations.
Thank you, Chair Tierney. So I'm here today with Krista Tanaka, the Road Safety and Traffic Investigation Program Manager at the city, as well as Kathy Karuma, our Senior Engineer for Road Safety. Kathy's going to do a short presentation to provide some context on the work that her and the team did over the last year.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Phil. Good morning, everybody. I'll start by providing a bit of background information. Next slide, please. Thank you. At the May 22nd, 2019 council meeting, Mayor Watson and Councillor Blais brought forward a cycling safety inquiry. Staff were asked to prepare a report for Transportation Committee that included a review of high volume intersections with heavy traffic and cycling interaction, potential options for safety improvements, and a roadmap for changes to existing and future infrastructure. Next slide, please. Staff identified 74 high volume intersections with heavy traffic and cycling interactions. These intersections were identified as part of a preliminary screening exercise that was based on a combination of high cycling volumes, high volumes of turning motor vehicles, high posted speeds, and roadway classifications. Historical collision data was also reviewed. Data from 2014 to 2018 was also considered. Cycling collision data was also considered in this screening process. Of the 74 intersections, what we found were 44 of these were already recently redesigned in the planning, design, or construction phase, included ongoing safety reviews, or were located outside of the city's jurisdiction. As the chair mentioned, to note, 10 locations fall under federal ownership and or city and federal ownership. The remaining 30 intersections were selected for further review. Next slide, please. Staff also consulted with cycling safety stakeholders, including Bike Ottawa, Ecology Ottawa, Enviro Centre, and the Healthy Transportation Coalition. These stakeholders provided feedback and input into the preliminary screening list. Next slide, please. Once staff selected the intersections for further review, a consulting firm was hired to conduct a review of each of the locations. So their analysis included collision data and traffic data analysis, completing site visits at each of the locations, developing a menu of potential short-term countermeasures such as pavement markings, signs, speed display boards, and flexible signs, developing a preliminary long-term conceptual design to provide separated cycling facilities and or protected intersections, and as well as developing rough order of magnitude cost estimates for all the conceptual designs that were developed. So the total was approximately, high-level total was approximately 32 million, and these costs did not include potential property impacts or impacts to utilities, hydro burials, and a very high-level signals infrastructure cost estimate. Next slide, please. Moving forward, staff will look for opportunities to incorporate these conceptual designs developed through the study into future city projects and programs, including infrastructure renewal or growth projects as should funding become available, cycling network expansion, as well as cycling safety enhancement opportunities through our road safety action plan. Next slide, please. Also moving forward, we will continue to seek opportunities to implement the short-term countermeasures that were developed through this study to help improve intersection safety where applicable, and the implementation of these short-term measures can be completed via existing city programs, depending on established priorities and the funding available. So that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you very much for that. At this point, we will go to delegations. First up, and I think, there we go. Mr. Cunningham, you're in the room. I could see you. So if you're not familiar with this, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. First off, I'd like to say thank you for letting me speak, and I'd like to congratulate the city for undertaking what's been a pretty fulsome review. You know, from what we see, it covers all parts of the city across several wards, and reflects a lot of local priorities. And obviously did great job of talking to groups such as our own and stakeholders within the city. So I think it's an excellent footing for starting this discussion. So from Bike Ottawa's perspective, we've made big strides in the last several years to become a much more bike-friendly city. And you can see the results of that. Year over year, we see that biking is the fastest growing mode of transportation. And it represents a key part of meeting a lot of the city's goals around active transportation and making that the predominant way the city moves around, as is discussed for the upcoming Transportation Master Plan. And it also supports other planning goals, such as creating 15-minute neighborhoods. And it, has shown time and time again, is a popular alternative for many during the pandemic. We've seen bike sales going up quite a bit. And as the city works through ongoing issues with LRT, it has also been a popular way for people to get around. That being said, we've made real progress towards becoming a biking city, but there's still a lot of work to do, as we can see, to make sure that we have a network of safe, segregated infrastructure that enables people of all ages to ride comfortably and safely. From that perspective, I'm really encouraged, when I see the list of projects and some of the proposed solutions, to see that they lean heavily on Vision Zero design principles. That recognize that infrastructure should be designed in such a way that the most vulnerable people on our roads, people walking, people on bikes, people in mobility devices, are afforded a high level of protection through engineering with designs such as protected intersections. That being said, as it is important as it is to identify problem intersections and deliver preliminary designs, we need council to take action to make sure these intersections are safe. And that does mean funding, even if no specific funding mechanism is being identified today. $32 million is not actually a lot of money in the context of a lot of the transportation investments we make to start tackling these intersections. By my count, that's about a quarter of what we'll pay, for example, to widen Strandherd Road. Or a small fraction of the cost to widen some of the other roads in our city. These are funded through the city's budget. Well, unfortunately, at this time, these critical safety investments are not. At this point, from what I've seen, there's about $800,000 that could be made available for work on one intersection. And while that's a welcome investment, we need to go a lot further. If we're serious about eliminating deaths on our roads, we do need to figure out how to fund this list of projects. Obviously, some will be easily funded through mechanisms like development charges or broader infrastructure renewal projects. But I think we have to make sure that we are making this list of projects a high priority and moving to address them as quickly as possible. So from where I'm sitting, I think there are three ways council can show leadership on safety for vulnerable users. We know that the federal government has announced that it will make funding available to municipalities for active transportation infrastructure. And that is probably one of the quickest ways that we can actually move to address some of these projects. As you are all aware, the 2021 municipal budget will be developed over the fall. And this is the opportunity for council to ensure that there is a permanent funding mechanism for cycling infrastructure, including safety infrastructure upgrades such as this, and moving beyond a status quo where these are addressed through solely through other infrastructure projects or in a piecemeal fashion. And ultimately, the cycling plan that will be developed as part of the Transportation Master Plan needs to include making safety-related improvements like this a priority, ensuring that the city focuses more on giving consideration to vulnerable users ahead of as its first priority, rather than considering it just one of many competing priorities on our roads. So I would urge council to look and find a way to make sure that this gets implemented quickly. We're aware that there's all sorts of funding pressures for the city, but really this is not a big investment to make, and it will go a long way to making our roads safer for everyone and building on the work that we've all undertaken to make the city a much more bike-friendly place. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. We do have a question from Vice Chair Leeper.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Aaron, for the presentation. And obviously, I agree with everything that you have said. One question for you. You are speaking on behalf of Bike Ottawa today?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. The federal funding that's going to be made available for these types of projects, we're still waiting, if I understand properly, to hear from the province how that money will flow and what the parameters of that program are going to be. It strikes me as relatively obvious that these intersection modifications have got some of the highest potential to help make cyclists safer. When it comes time to determine as a city how we want to prioritize any new funding that is made available through the infrastructure funds, what kind of priority would this intersection modification list have for Bike Ottawa?
I think as an organization that is committed to the principles of Vision Zero and safe cycling infrastructure, we would place this amongst the highest priorities.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a consensus that might have emerge. Okay. Please.
No, sorry, go on.
Okay. And the only other question I had for you, throughout the document, there are short-term fixes that small modifications that aren't going to require a lot of budgetary contribution. For example, I'm taking a look at the corner of Bayview and Somerset Street, and there are things I recommend, like prohibiting right turns, for example. That doesn't cost a lot of money. Unfortunately, that list is not available in an easy to digest format. There's no sort of bullet points of things that are going to cost a lot of money and things that aren't. Can Bike Ottawa take a look at some of those items and let us know which are reasonably pursuable in the sort of immediate term?
We'd be glad to do that. Obviously there's, generally speaking, safety requires a lot of infrastructure investments in a lot of instances, but there's also a lot of things we can do, like you pointed out in this particular instance, like prohibiting rights on reds at busier intersections in the core that go a long way to improving safety. So we'd be glad to look at that list and provide some feedback.
Thanks. I'm going to ask staff as well about, how we can sort of create a list of immediate action items that may not require a lot of budget. So, but the help from Bike Ottawa would be, I think, invaluable. Chair, that's what I had. Thank you. Thanks, Aaron.
Great. And yes, thank you, Aaron. I don't see any further questions to delegation. So at this point, we'll move to questions to staff. Having a look at the board, Councillor Fleury, followed by Vice Chair Leeper.
Okay, yeah, I think there's a lot of positive here. We have a scan of some of the most challenging locations. Want to bring, so, I sort of use the in list and the out list. The staff have proposed one of the locations on the out list that I want correction for. So that location is basically a missing multi-use pathway at Cummings Bridge and North River. It is an NCC pathway. Yes, we are redoing Montreal Road, but we're not correcting. We're improving the at-grade condition, no question, but we're not solving it like what was done at Riverside and Bank, for example. So under the staff, referral, it says basically that Montreal Road revitalization is currently under construction, but that doesn't solve the safety issue for vulnerable users here, for pedestrians and cyclists going north to south or south to north along the NCC multi-use pathway across Montreal Road. So I don't know how to go about that change.
Chair, through you. So we are doing some improvements at that intersection, although it is at grade. Like you mentioned, we'd have to work with the NCC like we did at Bank and Riverside. That came up about 5-6 years ago, and there was room to do that and working with them. So we can take that back and go back to the NCC to see if there's opportunities. I'm just not sure. I mean, at the Bank and Riverside, we were fortunate that there was room under the bridge between the edge of the bridge and the abutment and the river to provide a pathway. So we'd have to take a look at that as well. But we'll take that back and discuss with the NCC and let you know.
Okay, just so we don't run around, before I read this report, I'm engaged with the city's TMP team, and I'm also engaged with the NCC on their pathway report, which was public yesterday. So, you know, I'm happy of the review. I want to remove the expectation that out of this report it's a resolved issue, because then it creates this concern. So I don't know if I need to move an amendment to remove it from the out list to make sure that I can continue to advance it through the TMP and discussions with the NCC.
Yeah, I guess just a comment on that, maybe Ms. G can provide sort of a broader context, but I mean, this list was looking at the intersection improvements, and the Montreal Road is improving it from what was there prior to the reconstruction. And so if there's opportunities to enhance it even more by doing this pathway, it won't preclude us from doing and looking at that. I don't know if that provides you comfort. But again, this was a snapshot in time for the location. It doesn't mean that, you know, in the next few months or few years there'll be other intersections that get identified, because we are seeing an increase in cycling usage, and there could be some intersections that weren't on the list today that may be required to be added or reviewed, and that'll continue to occur. So this is a work in progress, and we'll continue to strive for that. So I don't know if that allays your concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I don't debate that there'll be improvements through Montreal Road project. It's just the ad grade issue remains, right? So I recognize it's a longer term improvement and it's a different conversation. I was directed to the TMP in terms of project. I'm glad to follow that route. I just don't want to be pushed out because of this report now saying that it's addressed. That it's a question of process more than intent, I guess, in this question.
Okay, maybe I'll ask Ms. Chi to answer about the TMP.
Hello, Councillor. Yes, this issue you've raised with us before, and it does require some investigation, because even physically, whether we can put a pathway beneath the structure. So we will continue to work with Phil's team on the at-grade improvements until such time that we know that there is an alternative solution. But right now we don't have that information yet. And even I don't think you need to do an amendment to this report today, because you still have the other avenues of going through our transportation master plan, specifically our active transportation master plan. And we'll continue our discussion with you about this very specific location.
Okay. No, that's good to hear and clarify. More of a general set of comments. So other than the NCC element, are there other private accesses? I'll rephrase. Are there other accesses that are privately owned that were identified? Or is it ultimately, I know the chair was speaking earlier of writing to the NCC. I would certainly favor that, but I wonder if we've recognized others, you know, shopping malls or you know, employment nodes that tie into city intersections and have been reviewed.
I'll ask Kathy to respond to that.
Yes, thanks, Phil. Yes, it is noted in the report if there is potential property impacts to adjacent properties near intersections, but that hasn't been reviewed in detail at this point in time. Basically, it's just indicating whether or not property would be required to implement the proposed conceptual designs.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Two more quick ones, Mr. Chair. this is maybe a bigger question, but as our city continues to grow and we see new developments outside of the existing road network, it puts a lot of pressure to make sure that those are done right, or else local councillors have to come in with temporary seasonal traffic calming. So can staff just articulate and share with us the gains can even without funding, as private developments and subdivisions are approved and so on, how do we ensure that the lessons learned out of these intersections and road widths and so on are applied in the planning process or in the planning approvals process?
Vivi, do you want to answer this one?
Yes, they should be, because they are circulated, and my team specifically reviews the transportation issues for all modes and collates the responses from our colleagues that all work on transportation or road projects. And we do provide that feedback to our colleagues in the planning and economic, the planning department that deals with the various circulations on developments. So we expect that to occur. And actually in our policies, we have that a lot of the cycling infrastructure could be or should be, must be built by developers if, for their segment. So it's not just city funded projects that get the, that promote or advance the cycling program. It's also through development projects as well.
Okay. And then that's good to hear. And then my final question's around funding. So we sort of are in a backlog now. Obviously, these are capital investments. Glad to see maybe the federal government or senior levels of government funding. But I wonder, Mr. Chair, if as part of this year's budget, I know we're in the next few committees, we'll be looking at budget, if a clear description of the revenues that are coming out of both the red light cameras, for example, the ones we have along King Edward, and then those that are cameras in school zones. I'm unclear about where those revenues are going, because we're saying they're going back into traffic calming measures to slow down speeds. And I think that from my perspective, these identified locations should be kind of pulled into those efforts. And so I wonder if that could be just a direction to staff as they come back for this year's budget to highlight where the revenues are going in the coming year for where those investments are going in the coming year from revenues from both red light cameras and speed cameras.
Chair, if I could answer at least where they're coming from. So as per our road safety action plan that was brought forward to committee and council last December, any new revenues from red light cameras, as well as the automated enforcement, goes back into road safety, and it will be used to fund our road safety action plan. And so we'll be bringing forward a report in Q1 of 2021 that will identify the locations and the different initiatives that we're going to do to try to reduce the number of fatalities and serious injuries. So cycling is one important component, as well as other vulnerable road users. We also have intersections, the rural area where we see many fatalities occur with the high speeds, as well as high risk drivers. Those were our emphasis areas. And so the money that's going to be used will be used for those different areas. It'll be all based on the data that we do collect in terms of collisions, and also the measures that we can implement that will be found to be very effective in getting those numbers down. Because at the end of the day, it's not acceptable that one person is dying on a road. So our goal is to get to zero, both from fatalities and also serious injuries. So cycling is part of that. In the 2020 plan, there was about $500,000 that was allocated to cycling. Out of that plan, it included the example of Smythe Road with the intersection work that were there to improve things, as well as we've got $110,000, I believe, for just low cost improvements. There's 10 intersections that we'll look at in terms of using paint or as previously mentioned about turn restrictions and things like that we can do to enhance safety of cyclists. So it's a big bucket, and as we move forward with automated enforcement, we'll be able to use those funds to help make our roads safer.
Mr. Chair, just clear clarity on those points here. So,
Councillor, you're just out of time there. Do you have another question for staff, or are you just going to wrap up on this? Because I have other councillors wanting to speak here too.
Absolutely. It's a wrap up on Phil's response there. So can you clarify, Phil, what that amount is in terms of revenue for us to look at?
Okay, actually, if you want, go back on the board because that's an additional question. I'm moving along. Vice Chair Leeper.
Thank you, Chair. I guess two questions. One is a higher level question. In order for our city to grow sustainably and intensify sustainably, these kinds of cycling facilities in the mature neighborhoods, the built up area, are going to be required. Are we able to, in a future DC bylaw, start listing some of these projects in mature neighborhoods as DC eligible?
David, do you have an answer for that one? I know someone from planning's on the line.
I can respond to that.
Okay.
Yes, projects can be added to the DC background study, provided it shows that there's the growth component to it.
Yeah.
And it could be, we could get some DC funding. There's a small amount of growth associated with the project, or it could be significant if it provides that, it's a solution for intensification, and it's in a built up area. So we could make that argument, yes. And I expect to do that in the next review.
Yeah, so the path to that is ensuring that these projects are listed as projects in the Ottawa Cycling Plan, and then are included in the DC background study.
Yes, that's right. Because right now our cycling program does get some DC funding, so there is that source as well already. So for new projects, yes, we will have to look at that as well.
And I'm particularly interested in the difference between the greenfield developments and our mature neighborhoods. The corner of Baby Station Road and Scott Street is going to become very crowded with towers, and the only way that's going to be sustainable is if we're better balancing the modal share among people who are traveling through there. So that's important to me. The second question is just with respect to some of those smaller fixes, and Phil, you just spoke to those. What kind of a process would you like from councillors as we're reading through the projects in our ward? There are recommendations that, as I look at them, I'm like, let's do that today. How do you want to hear about those, and how can we move those forward?
Well, Kathy is the one who manages that program. So I think if there's any requests from yourself or you hear from the community, to identify locations, just send them to Kathy and she will look after that. And I don't know, Kathy, you want to elaborate on your team and how we review those?
Yes, no, that's correct, Phil. Thank you. Yes, if you do have any suggestions, please send them to me. We're also going through the report as well and seeing what can be implemented immediately through our cycling safety improvement program. Okay. So we've actually already done 3 locations this year in 2020 that are part of this study. So for 3 locations, we've implemented sign and pavement marking changes already, and we are planning for next year's location. So that's definitely a good time to discuss.
We'll rush to your door. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank
you, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Leeper. Councillor Menard, followed by Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to staff for the report. It is a thorough report, and so it's very good that this work was done. There's a lot of quality ideas. The designs that are within the report are excellent. We just need to see some of these move to fruition. And so I just had a few questions with regard to that. In terms of the intersections that were identified, we identified 74. We reviewed 29. Some of them we didn't work on because there's overlapping jurisdiction with the NCC. How do we work with them to help identify changes to those intersections that may be coming up in future construction cycles. And I say that just saying that we've had a great working relationship with the NCC. We've implemented new crossings for people, new designs with the NCC working in collaboration. They're very open to this discussion. So how can that conversation take place with the intersections that would be under the NCC's purview? What would city staff propose for that?
Well, like you said, I think we have a very good relationship with them when we come up with locations that are being rebuilt that are partly owned by the NCC and the city. We engage with them early in the design process, and like I know for the most part they're very receptive. The Bank Street and Riverside, is an example that I was involved with, and they were very helpful in terms of moving through the process and also in providing design options. And so I think, like you say, they're open to that. So it's just ensuring that we're there at the start of the work. And I know working with Vivi and also with Karina's group in the design, that does occur. And so we would expect that will continue. And I think, as Chair Tierney mentioned earlier, that he'll be sending a letter both with Councillor Leeper and Mayor Watson to the NCC just to apprise them of these locations, and if there's any opportunities in the near future, hopefully, if there's planned works in those intersections, that we can get working with them to enhance the safety of cyclists and pedestrians.
That's great. I'm happy to hear the chair and vice chair are going to collaborate on that. That's excellent news. In terms of the designs that we do have here, is there a plan to move to more of a detailed design for the 2029 that we did review? Is that possible? I mean, how do we see this put into action? How do we see this enacted? What is the plan to see that happen?
So the plan moving forward for those 29 locations is when there's opportunities moving forward, either because there's reconstruction occurring or there's development in the area, to start looking at those designs. So it's not that we're proactively going to go and do standalone designs unless we get directed to do so by council. This was more of an information report of these are the locations. They're on our radar now, and we're going to seek opportunities as we move forward to include them when those opportunities occur.
Okay, thank you for that. And just last piece for me, the Bank and River side intersection, both the north and south portions, though there has been redesigns. Obviously, we saw a tragic death there a few years ago, but and there were some changes made, some minor changes made, but we're still seeing a lot of collisions there, right at Bank and Riverside, and so that wasn't one that was included on the northern portion. We're now seeing Bank Street south from that intersection south past Walkley going to be redesigned. I'm really looking forward to it in terms of the traffic calming that's going to come there, the opportunity for small businesses, the bike lanes that are going to be coming in, the wider pedestrian walkways. All that is fantastic, but that intersection is not included in that piece. It's just outside of it. We're also seeing two very large towers proposed to be built, 26 stories and another 30-story, right at that intersection. So that Bank and Riverside piece, there's been 100 collisions there in the last 5 years. The collisions continue there, and so it's a dangerous one. It continues to be a dangerous one. So that is one that I'd like to see added in terms of the development we're going to be seeing come. How do I do that? How do I get that included as a review based on all the changes that are going to be happening here and the desires that we're seeing of, for people getting across the city?
David, do you want to talk, since it's tied to development? I would expect that we would want them to provide some sort of information on that. And I don't know, Vivi?
Yeah, well, Bank Street renewal is underway in terms of the design. So our team has been discussing this with infrastructure services to see what else can be done at that intersection between Bank and Riverside at the northern segment. Whether the intersection can be pulled away a little bit to provide space for a protected intersection, that we can do. In terms of on the Bank Street Bridge itself, that may be more complicated because it is a narrow structure, and if we do put in a cycling facility there, it might be very expensive because it would may involve a rebuilding of the that metal structure. Or we could review what would be the implications, and is it feasible to turn that into 3 lanes instead of 4? Now, we know that there's a lot of traffic on that bridge already, so this may not be viable, but staff are looking into these issues, recognizing that it didn't make it on the list, primarily because it may involve the rebuilding of the bridge. So it is in our shop to review, Councillor.
Okay, that's great to hear. And I've been talking with the developers that are looking at putting up those buildings. I know they seem open to some infrastructure changes there, because again, that's a really dangerous intersection as it is. And, a cantilever system may work well there. And you keep those 4 lanes, but you've got that cantilever for protection. So I'm looking forward to talking with you about it. And thank you, staff, for the report. And Chair, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Next on the list, we have Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I believe I've been through almost all of those intersections on my bike. So it's, I feel like a daredevil now when I hear this report. I just wanted to ask just a quick question about Moody and Corkstown, because it is stage 2. But I just want some assurance that we're going to do it before stage 2 because of all the construction. We need the safety during that period of time during the construction. So I'm just going to ask that it be implemented earlier rather than later, because it's going to be very soon that it's starting up. And I just want to make sure that there's safety there. We're already seeing compromises in terms of cycling routes with stage 2 construction in other areas. And that's something we have to keep in mind, that while the construction is being done, we need safety. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll follow up with Michael Morgan and his team to first find out what the timing is, and if it matches what you're asking for, then we'll let you know. If it doesn't, then we'll work with them to see if we can advance those works.
Thank you, and I appreciate this work. It's as a cyclist, I certainly appreciate those extra efforts. You feel very vulnerable out there, and every bit helps. Thank you.
Councillor Fleury.
Great, thank you. So Phil, I'm coming back to the road safety action plan. So what amount will be considered in your plan you're saying you're coming back to committee Q1 2021, but what's the total amount that we're going to look at?
So we're working right now through the budget, and that would be tabled, I believe, in November, in terms of the amount associated with this program.
And that would include red light cameras and speed zones?
Well, that's the intent is for that. But again, you have we've just started the the automated speed enforcement program. We are bringing forward a report probably next summer because the automated speed enforcement is a pilot. And because there are, we're trying to get in terms of from a road safety perspective over, we'll have over a 6 to 9 month period in terms of, are we seeing lower speeds? Are we, the amount of revenue that's being generated? Also the internal costs in terms of, our partners in Service Ottawa with the courts and even with revenue. So we want to get a big picture of what the implications are, so we can bring a wholesome report to committee and council on the program and our recommendations in terms of moving forward from the pilot program.
Okay, and then how do you weigh road safety and this particular report? Like, I'm confused as to, you talked about collision before, but in many ways, that it'd be the intersection always stop sign that we approved, but that was on today's agenda. And then this cycling safety review, how do you weigh all those factors into to your analysis?
So again, the road safety action plan, where and where we want to go, what we are going to do is base our recommendations in terms of how to move forward on a yearly basis in the different areas based on the data because ultimately our goal is to get to zero and zero fatalities and serious injuries, and we won't rest until that happens. So we use the data from the collisions from over a 5-year period in terms of the trends, but we also look to see if there's hotspots that occur that we may need to address. So that's all. That'll all be brought forward through our road safety action plan, and it'll sort of provide information in terms of why we've decided the different investments like we did in our report earlier this year.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're done. Okay. So on item number 3, is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. And just before we go to the added item, which was Councillor Fleury with the snow stuff, Kelly, correct me, there was one thing I was supposed to say before about item number 2, I believe.
It was actually item number 5. The
Right.
Daru's motion was carried, but the report as amended wasn't.
Oh, so the report as amended, is that carried?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for keeping me in line, Kelly. So we're going right on to the newly added item that it was related to snow. Okay, snow removal impacts on sidewalk. Councillor Fleury?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll ask Kelly just to share an image with you on the screen, and I'd like to refer everyone to a particular section of the response from staff. So this is staff written here. I'll read it. The purpose of the snow blower. So this is a section that I'm stealing, if you will, from staff's inquiry response. The purpose of the snow blower equipment is to remove the snowbanks, and it is not intended to clear the road to bare pavement. Operationally, a combo of truck is not deployed to plow the roadways after removal is done, to avoid pushing the snowbank onto the area where the snow is just removed. However, recognizing that the snowblower will leave residue on the roadway after the removal is done, and salt truck is deployed to distribute salt to melt as much as the remaining residue as possible. So what I want to share with you is I struggle as a councillor and as a member of this committee. Over the last number of years, what's become apparent is we do a great job of clearing, and we can debate on priorities and which roads, which sidewalks, and so on. And we as a committee, we've done a great job of doing a fulsome review, what's called the MQS, and I believe that will be coming at some point in 2021. I guess my struggle is I've identified a window of issues as it not relates to the clearing, because we do a great job clearing, as you know. Sidewalks, streets are cleared, and then the snow adds on to that little boulevard portion on the edge of the street. And when the street becomes too narrow, we go and remove the snow. The issue that has been identified by businesses and residents is that once the snow is removed by our practice, we leave conditions on sidewalks and in lanes, roadways, in worse conditions than they were post-clearing. So what I share with you on the screen is an image of Montreal. Following the removal of the snow, you can see the sidewalk plows following the equipment to push the minimum residue that's left on the sidewalk or the roadway back to that boulevard portion of the road. So, Mr. Chair and Clerk, I'm looking for your advice so it is a practice that the city is not conducting. I've met with staff. They're obviously comfortable by their approach. I'd like that to be reviewed, and I don't know as a committee member how to advance that. So I'm looking for advice and assistance. Is it something that we could direct be reviewed as part of the MQS review? I'm looking for some advice here.
So at this point, I have to assume, is it Kevin that would be speaking to this item? It sounds like, first of all, there's a couple of things that I'm making note of. I'm looking at the fact, just to be clear, Matt, you're asking for a change in our current policy on how we plow roads?
No.
Okay. So maybe, Lila, maybe you want to speak to this because anything that has a cost implication these days is also always a concern. So Lila, can you respond to the councillor, please?
Thank you, Chair. In speaking about the snow removal process, we do have a very defined and a very complex snow removal process. So we do start off, we bring the graders in, and as Councillor Fleury has suggested, once the sidewalks and roadways start to become narrowed because of the snow banks, we bring in the graders, which will pull the snow onto the roadway. Behind the graders comes our snow blowers. And what that does is it actually chews up and removes the snow into the trucks, so the trucks move on going forward. It's actually similar to the picture that Councillor Fleury had shown. We do have a sidewalk machine that does follow on the sidewalk area to make sure that any of that residue is pushed back out towards the roadway. I think what Councillor Fleury's concern is once the snow blower goes through the area, there is a tiny bit of residue that is left on the asphalt, and that's typical to people using snow blowers at home. It's a tiny bit of residue at the bottom, and what ends up happening is we recognize that, and we send a salt truck on later to lay some salt so that it can activate and melt the rest of that snow, as well as with the car traffic, that helps speed up that process and gets the water off of the roads and into drainage. The councillor is suggesting that we bring back another combo truck after the process to actually clear up that area. And just for council's or committee's understanding, when we go through snow removal operations, it is about a 2 to 3 week time period to complete it. So in order for us to come back around and attempt to clear what is remaining, we are a considerable period of time out. So the salt, which we are able to do, and we are very cautious of the salt that we use. We have a great salt management practice in place, but that is what helps us ensure that the roads stay safe as we continue with the snow removal process. I know if there are, and what I've told the councillor, we aren't perfect. We know that there are ways to improve. We have gone through the service delivery review for the 2019-2020 winter season. I think committee and council is well aware that there were a number of improvements that we've seen, and we are always looking to continuously improve. So if we do have specific situations where there's some concern because there's additional ice buildup because of that practice, we are more than willing to go review that situation and rectify it at that time.
Councillor Fleury?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm asking for clarity from the clerks. So I don't have an item to debate, I guess, is the issue. There is an inquiry that I submitted, there's a response, and I'm asking for, could we consider the practice or the current procedure to be reviewed as part of MQS, which would allow residents and businesses to engage. I'm not here to debate the process at this point. I'm just asking for clarity on what's the best channel. Could it be considered as an element in the MQS review?
And Lila, what's your thought?
And I'm wondering if that is direction from the city clerk, if we can maybe get some direction in terms of, is it a motion that is put forward? Kevin, do you have additional information?
Well, I was just going to say the MQS review is well underway. Mm-hmm. We have consultants on board. We've got a term of reference. They've already done their first baseline report. So if we were to inject this as part of the MQS review, I think we would be relooking at those terms of reference and likely increasing the PO that we've given to, we've executed with the consultant. And if members of committee will remember, this was a budget pressure of a couple of years ago that was somewhat debated. I think it's around $230,000. So I would, and we are marching towards a winter to get our new MQS on board. We're about to embark on public consultation. So I'd be a little reluctant to start injecting new things for the consultant to look at this point.
Okay. So Councillor Fleury, do you have any further questions for staff? Because we have 3 more people on the board.
I guess I haven't heard from the clerk, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, as a committee member who's raised an inquiry, there's a staff response. I'm proposing the MQS, but I'm open if there is a procedural approach, a practical approach that is used as a member of committee. How do I refer for a review? I guess is.
Well, I'll look for the clerk to speak, but I think the only really thing you could do is put forward a motion, which you're always entitled to do.
And I'd have to consult with Caitlin to get you an answer.
While do you have further questions, Matt? Because I just want to get through the few people here. Councillor El-Shantiri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad Kevin stepped in because I was just going to ask. A couple of years ago, we had the Auditor General's report, and it was quite a bit of change, and staff agreed to those changes. And I thought, that the staff comply with most of those recommendations from the Auditor General's report. And now we have a report also coming to us, and then we're adding on in the middle of that process. So, Mr. Chair, whether my colleague put a motion or direction, I will not support neither one, direction or motion at this time. I think we need to wait to see what the consultant coming up with. One of the question we asked in the past, in those areas when we have a heavy snowstorm, and I know the staff do a great job plowing the snow, would that be possibility? And I think I asked that a few years ago. Do like Montreal does, bring the trucks and pick up the snow at once instead of plowing it first and then collect it after. Is that a possibility in certain? I'm not saying you can do that in West Carleton, which is larger than the city of Calgary. I'm suggesting in a few streets in Sandy Hills or in area where we know there's no storage capacity. Would it have been possible, and we asked that, would it have been possible to have the grader and to pick up the snow at the same time? Like you have a truck driving in front of the snow blower and pick up the snow at the same time. Would that ever looked at like Montreal does, downtown Montreal?
So Chair, through the Chair, we're definitely looking at best practices for other municipalities across the country and even in the northern states on some of their practices. So those will come out through the consultant's report and will help form some of our recommendations going forward.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to wrap it up. And I would encourage my colleague not to jump the queue here. Let's wait for the consultant report before any direction or before any motion. Anything at this point, I will not be supporting. But thank you for the indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Leeper, followed by Councillor Hoogley.
Thanks. Leila, I'm just wondering, you said that there is, after the grading and snow blowing, there's often a small amount of snow left on the road, and that's generally my experience. Is it temperature dependent? Because sometimes it will leave 8 inches of thick ice, and the storm drains will actually get covered over. And what I'm hearing from you is that that's not necessarily within our standard, and that we should be following up with the city when those sort of instances occur.
Yes, if you're seeing extreme circumstances, absolutely. It could be for a number of reasons. Is there high iron? Is there something that caused the additional snow? Is there ice buildup that we were not able to remove? So we would look at those situations individually. For the most part, you will see just a light level of snow that's left, and that's where, again, the salt and the road traffic will help melt that and push it away. But when it comes to drainage, absolutely, if there's concerns because we see additional ice or snow, yes, we fully ask you to reach out to us, and we will take a look at those on a case-by-case basis.
I am just wondering, and I'm sorry to get into the nitty-gritty on this. There are, after snow removal, there is snow that's left on the road. and residents go out and they push the snow back into piles on the street, which is where they're piling the snow. And my entire ward is that way. Is that costing us more as opposed to, like, does it mean we have to remove more often?
Not quite understanding the circumstance. You are meaning after snow removal operations happening and the businesses in particular, are you speaking about?
No, the residences, because there is still snow at the end of their driveway, past the sidewalk. They're plowing it, they're shoveling it back to bare pavement, which it was before the snow removal operation, and they're piling the snow in the street next to the sidewalk, which is where, even though we're not supposed to, we're putting the snow anyways. I just wonder if that's accelerating the time frame when we have to remove again, which I know is a very expensive operation.
It's quite possible. It really depends on the amount of snow that we're receiving in a winter.
Yeah.
It obviously hastens the time that the roadway shrinks in size. We do ask residents to put the snow up onto the right-of-way, up onto the lawns or property, so that it does keep the roads as wide as possible. The one thing that you may have seen last year is one of our major changes was to ensure that we had around-the-clock coverage during and after storms. So we were doing more winging back of snowbanks, casting of snow to try and widen those areas to not get to the point where we have to do removal, particularly in areas that have space to store the snow. So depending on what kind of, I know in your ward, for example, you've got some very narrow areas. Does it hasten us having to go out to do snow removal? Yes. We do ask residents to please push it back up onto the right-of-way where possible, so that we can widen those roads and keep them safe.
Yeah, I just wondered, to Councillor Fleury's point, if the road were bare pavement, because I know it's going to be expensive, and I presume you can get us a cost to get the road to bare pavement after removal. Is there a balance in terms of how frequently you have to do it versus that additional cost? Something to explore at a later date. I appreciate it. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just following up on that last exchange with Councillor Leeper, he mentioned where sometimes after the plowing there are, I call them snow boulders or ice bricks left behind. But I've seen in the past where crews come in with the backhoes and just pick all that up. Like maybe it's 12 hours later or whatever, but it's always done right away afterwards. So I don't think we really need a new process for that. And I want to bring attention to the fact that in new neighborhoods that we're seeing out in the suburbs, there's not a lot of snow storage in there. Mm-hmm. So you're running into problems where you have to do snow clearing out there. So I'm not interested in a policy that says in one neighborhood we're going to do additional snow clearing, but we're not going to do it elsewhere. I think it has to, if you're going to take that step and do additional snow clearing, I think we have to identify the areas around the city that lack in snow storage, and perhaps there'd have to be a special levy or something to cover the cost of the extra snow removal in there. But I agree with Councillor El-Shantiri that we shouldn't be doing this on the fly and motions in this meeting today. It should be a discussion when the results of the review come back to committee, I'm assuming in the new year. Mm-hmm. So, okay. You would agree with that, Lila?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor. Yes, we do have a number of processes in place that we do clean up after some of the snow removal process, because like you said, there are times where some boulders are left, drains may be covered. So we are going back and doing those. Agreed, we've got some processes that we're going to be looking at, some best practices that we're going to be looking at. We will be coming back to committee and council in late, I think, Q3 2021, prior to the 2022 draft budget process. to provide you with the results of the maintenance quality standard review, the winter maintenance quality standard review, and provide some options moving forward. And that's where you're going to see us looking at, whether it's specialty spaces, whether it is some of those new communities, types of equipment, and practices that will be best for the city going forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I don't see any other speakers on this item. I'll just throw in a couple of points of thanks to wonderful staff. I've visited the shops. I've seen a lot of the new equipment. You always are willing to take us and show us how these things work as councillors, and even let us drive some of these plow trucks sometimes, which is kind of cool. Laura can really dial around in that plow truck. I saw that. That being said, also the new technologies. We all remember a few years ago that snowstorm from hell and how we had to try to stay on top of it. You guys have really upped your game. So to Kevin and you, Lila, all the members, hardworking men and women within our shops, I want to thank you. And let's hope 2020 doesn't give us snow. It's given us everything else, but we don't want any more snow. So
sorry, Chair, we need snow.
Yeah, okay. George wants it, but just George. So all that to say, I believe there's no more discussion on this item. So we do have some other housekeeping matters that are here. I'm just going to move down within the agenda, and Kelly, keep me in line. We have a notice of motion. Councillor Vice Chair Leeper, if you wanted to go ahead with that.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, notice of motions.
Oh,
is it mine first?
Yeah, you're up. Yeah, you're up to bat. Yes.
Okay, so for the next Transportation Committee meeting, I'll be bringing a motion to retain the cycling infrastructure that was put in on Holland Avenue to account for the detour around construction of the Jackie Holtzman Bridge. I'll just read the resolutions. Therefore, be it resolved that the temporary cycling lanes remain as permanent facilities on Holland Avenue from Kenilworth to Tyndall. Be it further resolved that the speed limit be posted to 40 kilometers per hour to support transit service and thus promote sustainable mobility choices for our residents. And be it further resolved that any work is required to carry out the above directives, such as refreshing of line painting, posting and new speed limit signs, be funded within the existing budget of the Jackie Holtzman Bridge. So I look forward to having that for the next TC.
Excellent. Thank you, Vice Chair. I believe you also have another motion you're moving on behalf of Councillor Kavanagh.
I do, and maybe I'll just turn it over to Councillor Kavanagh to read out the resolutions.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. Just to wrap up really quickly, this is for the Britannia area. Currently, we have a street, Britannia Road, the upper part of it that's 50K. We're going to make it a speed gateway community to bring it all down to 40K in that community. We already have a 40K limit on the other half of Britannia Road, so we want to put it all in line. And we have young families moving into this area more and more. That is the reasoning for this motion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. So we'll deal with those next meeting. I'm looking to Kelly. Do we have any inquiries?
None that I've received.
Any other business? Adjournment, and our next meeting will take place on November 2nd, 2020. Thank you very much to all the committee members. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.